2.6b, Order of Operations with Fractions. Remember, the order can be remembered with PEMDAS, or Please Excuse My Dear Aunt Sally, where P is parentheses, but it can also be an absolute value. E is for exponents. M/D is for multiply and divide, which goes from left to right. And the A and S are for add and subtract, which also goes left to right. When doing order of operations with fractions, you're probably going to need some scratch paper. Let's look at example 1. Here's example 1. Let's start with P for parentheses. There are parentheses, but remember, it's only for what is inside of the parentheses, which there's nothing to do, so this step is skipped. And we move on to exponents. There is an exponent, as you can see, so we will start there. And 5/2 squared means you square each of the numbers, giving you 25/4. We will place this into the problem, and then carry everything else straight down. Next, we move on to multiply and divide, which goes left to right. So as you can see, we're actually going to be doing our division first. Remember, with division, you turn it to multiplication and you use the reciprocal. Also remember, we're going to reduce. 3 goes into 9. 9 divides by 3 3 times, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. 5 goes into 5 once, and 5 goes into 10 twice. This gives us 3/8, which we place back in the problem. Now we see that we still have more multiply and divide, so we will do this step next. So we have 25/4 times 1/30, which we then need to reduce. 5 goes into 25 5 times, and 5 goes into 30 6 times. This gives us 5/24, which we place back into the problem. We now have the fraction 3/8 plus 5/24. And we're on to the add and subtract step. But as you can see, our denominators do not match. Therefore, we must find a least common denominator, and we'll use mental math, where 24 divided by 8 gives us 3, so our least common denominator is 24. That means we just need to change the first fraction, or 3/8, which we're going to multiply it by 3. This will give us 9/24. Let's place that back in the problem. Now that our denominators match, we can add together. 9/5, or 9 plus 5 is 14 over 24. Remember, when you get to the end of the problem, you must reduce. Both of these numbers are divisible by 2, which gives you 7/12. Our final answer is 7/12. As you can see, there are quite a few steps, so let's look at another example. Here's example 2. Once again, let's start with P for parentheses. 8/5 is in parentheses, but there's nothing to do inside, so it doesn't count. But remember, absolute values are actually parentheses, so let's start there. We have 7/3 minus 9/2 in an absolute value. We must first find our least common denominator, which is 6. Then let's change each of our fractions so that their denominators match and we can subtract. The 3 needs to be multiplied by 2 and the 2 by a 3. This will give us 14/6 minus 27/6, which gives us negative 13/6. Remember, this is still inside of an absolute value. But when you take the number out of an absolute value, it becomes positive. Remember, that is what an absolute value does. It takes whatever's inside and makes it a positive number. This means we put 13/6 back in the problem. Also remember, whenever you take something out of an absolute value, you must put it back into parentheses as to not change the problem. We can now carry down everything from above. As you can see, we are done with the parentheses step as there's nothing to do inside any of the parentheses. So now let's move on to the second step of exponents. As you can see, there are exponents in this problem. So we have 8 squared over 5 squared, because remember, you give the exponent to both the numerator and the denominator. This gives us 64 over 25. Let's put that back in the problem. Now our exponent step is complete, and we can move on to multiply and divide. We see that this is a multiply and divide, or specifically multiply. Remember, if there's no symbol between two things, it means multiplication. So we actually have -9/10 times 13/6, which we can then reduce. 3 goes into 9 3 times, and 3 goes into 6 2 times. Remember, the negative did not get crossed out. This gives us -39/20. Let's put this back in the problem. Now we have completed the multiply and divide step. So we can move on to add and subtract. Since our denominators do not match, we're going to need to find a least common denominator. Remember, with larger numbers, we may need to find the prime factorization in order to find the least common denominator. This means that we find the prime factorization of both 25 and 20. 25 is 5 times 5, and 20 is 5 times 4, which is 2 times 2. So this gives us a 5 squared and 2 squared times 5. So our least common denominator has both 2's and 5's, specifically 2 2's and 2 5's, remembering that we take the highest exponent from each. This means we have 4 times 25, or 100, is our least common denominator. Now, we must take our 64/25 and our 9/20 and multiply them by their missing factors. The 25 is missing a 4, and the 20 is missing a 5. 64 times 4 gives us 256 over 100, and 9 times 5 gives us 45 over 100. 256 minus 95 gives us 211 over 100. Actually, common mistake that happens quite often is that you forget to carry the exact number over. So let's change that to a 39, which means that we actually have 195 here, and 256 minus 195 is 61. 61 100ths is our answer. Remember, when doing order of operations with fractions, there's going to be lots of steps, and as you can tell from example 2, you can make mistakes very easily. So make sure to take your time and to do all of your scratch work to make sure that you don't miss numbers or parts of the problem.